Hey there sugar dumplings, thank you so much for joining me for this video, which is going to be all about my issues with reading and how I'm helping myself to deal with those issues. In my most recent depth year video that I did mention that reading has been an issue for me on and off for quite a few years now. I used to be a very voracious reader when I was younger. I was constantly with my head in a book. I was really known as like a bookworm child, and one of my stepfather's relatives even suggested to my mum that she take my books away and make me go outside more because I was just constantly reading or writing or making art. Fortunately, my mother listened to her intuition and just let me do what I wanted to do because it's worked out fine for me. So yeah, basically I have been known as a reader for a long time, and I had a little bit of an identity crisis when I ran into some issues with reading in my 20s, and I've been slowly grappling with those issues ever since. And I did mention in my depth year update video that I would be willing to do a video on this if it was of interest, and I had a really high number of comments of people saying, do the reading video, I'm interested, I also have issues with reading, I also have problems. So hopefully this is going to be useful for any and all of you who have your own issues. So I want to first of all talk through what my issues with reading have been, because I have noticed that a few people that have described their issues to me are having different kinds of issues to me, and for a lot of us there's a lot of overlap and people are having very similar issues to me. So I want to be clear about where I'm coming from with the problems that I was having and still continue to have to an extent, but I'm kind of working through them slowly. I could probably cite 5 quite specific reasons why I stopped being such a voracious reader. I started finding it harder to read, I started finding it harder to retain the information that I was reading, and I started to find the whole thing less enjoyable, basically. First of all, shared living. I did shared living on and off through the entirety of my 20s, and by shared living I mean we have a shared living area, we have shared bathrooms, but we have our own bedrooms. And so we would congregate together in the living room as friends or housemates, but we would have like our separate areas where we would have our stuff. And that's what a lot of people do, not only in this country but, you know, across the Western world, when it comes to being able to have something affordable that is a nice space for you, but you do have to cohabit with others on the basis of money, on the basis of just not being able to afford to run your own place, basically. And a lot of people really love shared living. They prefer it to living alone, you know. Some people don't want that degree of solitude. So shared living was something that I did on and off through my 20s. I spent a large amount of my time living with friends or living with housemates and friends, and I can tell you that there was a certain point in my 20s where the shared living situation got very out of hand. There was suddenly an influence in one of my shared houses, which I shared with friends, that was not very accommodating or friendly, and it was actually a friend of mine that I had invited to come and live with us, more fool me, and it ended up being a complete shit show. It was total chaos. He was having ridiculous parties in the week, he was having friends over that were stealing food out of our fridges, he was pissing in the back garden. I mean, he was just leaving the place a total tip. Needless to say, we are not friends anymore. We have moved on from each other. We've moved out of each other's lives. Sometimes when you live with people, you really see sides of them that you never would have seen if you hadn't have lived with them, and that's why some people have a rule not to live with friends. But that's another story. So basically, during that time, I found it incredibly difficult to relax when I was in my home. When I was in my bedroom, even, it was hard to relax. He was living next door to me, and because of the tension that was there and the feelings of wanting to say something and wanting to confront him, but also wanting to keep the general situation between everybody harmonious, it was very difficult for me. I felt like I was always on tenterhooks, and when I saw him, I wanted to disguise my animosity and the tension, but at the same time I wanted to address it, and I wanted him to understand what he'd done and the severity of what he was doing. So because of all of that, that made it very difficult for me to relax in my house. The last 9 or 10 months that I was living in that particular shared house, there was a real problem for me with reading. I'd already slowed down with reading because I'd invited my partner at the time to come and live with me in the shared house, so he was also living in the room with me, and that meant that we did a lot more talking, you know, we did a lot more conversing together because there was someone else in the room now. So my reading had already slowed, and so had my ritual and spiritual practice, on the basis that you know, he was perfectly happy to vacate the room if I wanted to do a full moon ritual or a Sabbat ritual, but you know, it wasn't practical to just do random ritual on a, you know, on a random Wednesday or whatever, like I might want to. So there was a lot less meditating and a lot less ritual already. But even though he was quite a voracious reader, I just couldn't relax in the home. And I think that that is something that a lot of people overlook when it comes to wondering why their reading practice has slowed or why they can't seem to get the groove in the wood with reading. I think a lot of people don't think about the environment that they're in. Are they stressed by their environment? Is there clutter everywhere? Do they feel like they've got some sort of unfinished business, or there's an elephant in the room in their environment that they can't talk about or deal with maybe? And perhaps that is stopping them from just relaxing into enjoying the book and just enjoying engaging with the information. So whenever I left the house, whenever I sort of went to have coffee or just go and relax on my own or go for a walk, I felt like that was my decompression time. That was my time where I just breathed and I just kind of like, you know, went on walking meditations, as it were, and just sort of thought about what I was going to do and whether or not he would move out or whether or not we would have to move out or what. So I never felt like, okay, I'll go to a coffee shop and I'll read, because I was already so deeply stressed by the situation. I felt like this is my time to just decompress, basically. So that was one of the first things, shared living stress, essentially, and the time that I spent outside of the house, I was just decompressing. The second thing is one of the business issues that I had, the business related issues. I always felt like I needed to be doing something more productive. And I know this is something that is incredibly common with a lot of people, that they feel like they're not allowed to read because reading is essentially a waste of time, or there's always something more that they could be doing before they put their head on the pillow at night. And so why would they be reading? Why would they be giving themselves the luxury of 10 or 15 or 20 pages of a book when they could be doing some sort of chore that they've got on their list or whatever? And I definitely fell into that trap when I started my business. I definitely was telling myself there's always something more I can be doing, there's always something more I can be concocting or putting together, loose ends I can tie up, and I really sort of oppressed myself a bit with that. Definitely, I think that I was telling myself that reading is just this needless luxury, and if I've got time, why don't I do something more productive? Why don't I do something that's based around growing this kingdom that I was building? That is a really common one, and I think we need to remind ourselves of how important reading is for the mind and for the soul, and how it helps you so much. It helps you with your cognition, it helps you with learning new words or new collections of words, it wakes you up, it inspires you. I think it makes you a more engaging human being. There's so many reasons why reading is tops and why we should be doing it if we possibly can. So I definitely had that kind of issue of like, oh, I should be doing something more productive. And that is just about powering through with the knowledge of how productive and beautiful reading actually is, and noticing how much better you feel and how much more productive you are in the world when you are engaging in reading, how much better you feel afterwards, how much more switched on. I feel so much better when I've done some reading and given myself that time. The second business issue that I ran across is one that I think is very, very common, but I think a lot of people don't recognize it. And it doesn't matter whether you've got a business or not. I think this affects a lot of people, but I think it affected me specifically because I have a business. And the issue was social media. I run quite a few social media accounts, and they are connected to what I do with my business and my creative life. And so they're connected to the kinds of things I put out there to my audience, they're connected to my marketing, they're connected to how I put my message out there in the world. And so they need to be fairly regularly maintained, and I put a lot into them. You know, I really am very conscious and very thoughtful about what I put onto my social media platforms. I'm conscious and thoughtful about what I put on this channel, and I really hope that comes across to people. So with all of that, it creates a short circuit in the brain. When you are checking social media and you're going from platform to platform to platform several times a day, looking at comments, looking at what other people are doing, putting up what you're putting up, etc., it creates a short circuit in the brain. We take on a lot of information, very different information, across lots of different platforms very, very quickly now. And that makes the act of sitting down and reading one book for a measure of time to be very difficult, because the brain wants that fix, switch it, change it up, go to Twitter, go to YouTube, go to Facebook, go to Instagram, go to Snapchat. and it just creates this sense that the brain is waiting for the next thing, and the brain does not want to just focus on this one topic, this one subject, and that can be heinous. And I found myself in that trap, and I still find myself in that trap to an extent, because I am on social media. It's the nature of my work, it's part of my job, it's part of what I do. But what I've learned to do is always to make sure that I'm checking the degree to which I'm going back to what I posted on social media, to make sure that I'm not being fixated on looking at the comments or responding to some comments or liking things or whatever. And I'm making sure that I'm consciously deciding when I'm going to check on social media. And one of the ways that I've done this that's made it better is that on Android phones, I don't know if it's the same on iPhone, but on Android phones, you can group a certain number of apps into a specific folder so that they're not available on your main list of apps. You have to go into a specific folder to grab those apps that are linked together. So I created a folder on my Android device called social media, and I backgrounded it in pink so it comes up really easily and I can find it really easily. And in there I've got my Twitter, my Facebook, my Instagram, my YouTube, and I've also got my email in there, and I just leave it all in there so that I have to make the conscious decision when I'm looking at my phone, is it a social media moment right now or is it not? And that's really helped me because they're all gathered together, and if I'm making the decision to look at them, I'm usually making the decision to look at them all. So it'll have to be a specific time of day when I've got 15-20 minutes free or whatever, where I can either post something on a social media platform or look at comments or reply to other people or do any number of those things. And it's less about just scrolling through my apps mindlessly and being like, oh yeah, Twitter, oh yeah, Facebook, oh yeah, YouTube, which I used to do, and it used to be a waste of time, and it used to really make my brain short circuit big time, and that made reading really difficult. So if you have that kind of issue, if you are very invested in your social media platforms, if you are a creative or a business owner and you know that you need to keep in touch and you need to be present as part of your business strategy, but you don't want to do your head in with going round and round on this bloody carousel, I would recommend grouping all of the apps together. And if that really doesn't work, I would recommend taking the apps off of your phone and actually only looking at social media when you are at your laptop or your computer, so that when you're out and about, you're not tempted to feed that dopamine frenzy that your brain gets itself into, where your brain wants more, different. What's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? I think it's been pretty widely established now that that does hinder us when it comes to studying or reading, doing something that is going to take a lot of our focus and effort, but is very sort of singularly focused. The brain struggles with that because of social media, because of the immediacy with which we can get more information, more inspiration, more stuff to chew on. I think that when we sit down and we try to read 50 pages of a book about one subject, the brain is like, where's the next thing? What's the next thing? You know, I'm waiting for that change up. And it does create a chemical release in the brain. Social media can be addictive for a few different reasons, and I'll leave a video down below that I made all about social media, all about how we can make sure we're having a healthy relationship with it. Please do watch that video if what I'm saying is resonating with you, or you feel like you do have issues with social media that are affecting your emotional well-being. I think really the dialogue that I had to have with myself about social media and internet presence was whether or not it's meaningful. And if it's not meaningful and I'm just like switching from one platform to another aimlessly, mindlessly, without a clear idea of what I'm doing or what I'm looking for, then I need to take myself away from it. The fourth of the 5 issues that I had was the fear of not retaining the information, or the worry about how much information I was retaining and having to constantly check in with that. I used to have these times when reading was already becoming more difficult for me because of issues I'd previously explained in the video, and it would be a case of just writing a massive amount of notes or stopping every 5 minutes to highlight something or note it down or whatever, and that is just the death of the joy of reading in a way. There's nothing wrong with some note taking, but I think it needs to be done in a way that is helpful and healthy, and I will talk about that later in this long workshop style video, and I will give you a few pointers as to how you can make the kinds of notes that are going to really stick and are going to be helpful and are not going to interrupt your actual enjoyment of the reading process. The fifth reason that I've been able to identify is overwhelm and choice. It's about having so many different things I could read, so many different topics I could get into. The possibilities are truly endless with books. So it really becomes a dialogue that you're having with yourself on this loop about how much time you have and how important the book is and whether or not there's something more important you could be digging into. And that definitely became a source of stress for me. And as I mentioned in my depth year update video, which I'll leave down below if anybody wants to watch it, I've come to a point now where not buying books has really helped me to deal with that feeling of not knowing what to read and worrying about reading the right thing and worrying about whether or not something is more important to read or less important to read. It's like the more books that you have, the more things that you amass that you could be reading, the worse that stress gets, or at least it does for me. So the feeling of just having a year where I'm not buying any fucking books and I'm just going to read what I've already got is very liberating in terms of that final issue. Okay, so now I've reached the part of the video where I want to talk to you about some solutions, some ideas that I feel I can posit to you that might help you with your own reading difficulties, different things that I've tried that have been useful to me. First of all, don't be scared of reading different kinds of things. This is something that really helped me so much. One of the ways that I got back into reading to feel more comfortable with it and to feel like I was connected to the process again was reading essays, reading short stories, reading poetry, things that you know that you're going to be done with in just a little while. If it's been a while since you've picked up a book and you want to get back into it, don't start with Lord of the fucking Rings. Do you know what I mean? Give yourself a break, pick up a poetry book, go for a book of essays or something like that. There's so many different amazing books of shorter things. I've got a book of interviews from the Guardian newspaper with different kind of like rock stars and artists and stuff. That's really interesting. I've got quite a few books that have interviews in them with people. I have got a book called Cupcakes and Kalashnikovs or something like that, which is a book of articles written over time by female journalists, and that is really amazing. I love that. Those kinds of things are really great because you can dip in and your brain knows that it's going to be done with in 10 pages time or 2 pages time or whatever, but you still feel like you're getting back into the reading habit. You've nurtured your brain with something amazing that you've read, but you know it's not going to be a great big long chapter and it's not a huge challenge that you feel like you're going to walk away from because you're just going to give up. Sometimes I think we turn our noses up at different things that we don't normally read. Like, I don't normally read fiction at all. I'm a non-fiction reader, but actually reading a little bit of fiction really gets me back into the groove when it's been a while since I felt like I could intake a large amount of information on something non-fictional. It just really gets me into the flow. It's a nice holiday for my brain in a way. It's kind of more escapist than it is about taking on lots of new info. So I've also broken down my reluctance to read fiction, and reading some classic fiction really helped me. It really just sort of helped me to get back into the groove, as I said again, because I'm being sort of swept away into a story. And I know there are loads of people watching this that do read fiction and are having problems with that, but maybe you need to switch to something different, like poetry, as I mentioned, or maybe non-fiction articles, or something that you don't normally read, something that is maybe a different genre of fiction for you. Just get yourself out of the usual pattern that you're in and see if that helps matters at all. And the other thing is, make sure that you try different formats. There are some people that have completely switched to an electronic format. They've picked themselves up a Kindle or something similar. I don't know what they're doing now. I don't know what the kids are doing because I don't read that way. I got a Kindle once a long time ago as a gift. I didn't like it. I passed it on. It just wasn't for me. I like the feeling of the book. I like the feeling of the pages. E. Cummings. I like the feeling of E. Cummings poetry, and it just feels like a nice, tangible, yummy yes. So that's for me, but not for everyone. And for a lot of people, it's amazing to have an electronic device. So you might want to try that if you've got the budget for it, and if you really are serious about getting back into the reading habit. Maybe borrow one from a friend or something like that. Give it a go. See if it's something that you feel you can get on with. For some people, it's so much better for them and they really enjoy that and prefer that. The next piece of advice that I have is make a genuine commitment to regularly reading. If you have a partner or friend or loved one that you can tell your plan to, get that accountability. Say to that person, I really want to get back into reading. I'm really wanting to challenge myself. I'm going to check in with you on this, or can you check in with me on this? Make sure that I'm sticking to my guns. It's not that other person's responsibility ever to make sure that you are sticking to your guns, but it is helpful sometimes if you tell somebody what you want to do. It's like if you want to start a workout routine and you tell someone in your life that that's what you're going to do, then they can say, hey, it's been a few days since you went running. Are you still in there like swimwear? Are you on it like a car bonnet? Or what the fuck's going on, sweetie? And it just helps you to be like, yeah, you know what? I'm stealing my will. I'm convicted to this. I want to do it. So definitely decide why you want to read. What are your reasons for it? Why do you miss it? Why do you want to get back into it? And make yourself accountable. And if you want to and you can, ask someone else to keep you accountable too. If you are one of those people who struggles with worrying that you're not retaining enough of the information and it's not all going in, first of all, just be aware that not everything you read in every single book is going to go in. That's not how it works. A lot of the time you're going to retain the stuff that is interesting to you, that sort of, you know, woke you up in a way. Like I remember I once read this biography of Marie Antoinette by Antonia Fraser, amazing book. And of course it's a really, really long book with a lot of information in it. I certainly didn't remember everything, but there are things that I still remember from that book to this day, and I read it 10 years ago. It's just those things that stick out, that are really interesting pieces of information, or things that really illuminated you on the topic that you really just did not know before. Don't pressure yourself to remember everything. If you are someone that stops always and like takes notes or highlights things, and you're finding that that's ruining the reading process for you, I would definitely recommend having a little list, rather like this one that I've got right here, of questions that you can ask yourself at the end of every chapter if you want to, or at the end of the book entirely, depending on how you feel, depending on how long it is, etc. So I printed this list of questions off of the internet. I've got no idea where I got it from. I'm really sorry. I printed it off a long time ago. And basically it's questions to ask yourself about the text. And the questions are, what were the key 2 or 3 things I learned in this chapter or text? What really interested me about this chapter or text? Who could I introduce this information to and why? What would I have liked to see in there which wasn't touched on or included? What is the style, tone and pace of the text? What other information do I have, if any, on the topics raised in this chapter or text? What other topics might I like to explore in conjunction with the ones raised in this text? How do I imagine the activity or scenario described in the text or chapter? And would I read more about this topic? This really just gives you a chance to check in, I think, with what you've retained, how it's been of value to you, and, you know, how much you've taken in, and just confirming for yourself that, okay, I've read that bit now, I've read that book, I've read that chapter, I've confirmed it for myself through doing this little ritual answering of questions, and now let's move on. And so I think that kind of thing can be really helpful, even if you just get to the end of a chapter or you get to the end of your book and you ask yourself, what did I learn? What did I retain? What do I remember? What did I enjoy? And how much did I enjoy the book on a scale of 1 to 10? You know, whatever you want to do, you can just ask yourself one question if you want to. This one is going to be tough for some people, and some people are just going to cringe as soon as I say it, but following the 50-page rule has been very helpful for me. The 50-page rule is basically where if you are really not feeling the book by 50 pages in, you just stop reading it. Stop reading it. Life is too fucking short, you know? And there's been a few times over the years when I've done that, and it's been really difficult for me, and I felt like I've failed in some way. But after I started having my problems with reading, I started to become a lot more free and easy about it. I was like, you know what, if I'm not enjoying this, if it's a chore to me and I really don't want to pick it up, why would I keep picking it up? I'm not in school anymore, I'm not at uni, I don't have to read things that don't interest me necessarily. I can do what the hell I want. So maybe if you're forcing yourself to get through books that are drudgery, the 50-page rule is good. You could actually have a 10-page rule, a 15-page rule, a 25-page rule. See how you feel, see how you get on with it. It just provides you with an escape route if you feel like, this is actually not helping me with my reading issue because I don't want to carry on reading it. But do be aware, if you're one of those people with a wandering eye and you want that book over there, that book over there, and you are confused and overwhelmed by what you want to read, then you might be one of those people that wants to keep it to a 50-page rule rather than lessening the amount of pages, because it could be that you just want to read the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, and you're not actually investing as fully as you could. So keep it 50 pages if you know that that's an issue that you do have. having a sip of my rose lemonade tea. Absolutely divine, darling. Okay, what's my next piece of advice? I've got my handy little notes here. Okay. Limit social media usage. This is something that I mentioned within my own set of problems that I had regarding reading. If it's an issue for you, but you don't know it, then you might really want to think about how much time you spend on social media, how that time is spent on social media, and whether or not that might actually be a problem for you. And as I mentioned also earlier, when I said that I had an environment that was not conducive to reading, that's something you may also need to think about. You know, it might be thinking about how you can change it up, how you can get out of your environment and make the commitment to read somewhere else. You know, those kinds of things, they definitely affect you as well. So first of all, if you are not aware of whether or not your social media usage is affecting your ability to read, you know, limit your social media usage or try something different with it. And if you feel like it might be your environment, change up your environment. If you know that it's something to do with your biorhythms as well, like you're not getting enough sleep, you're overworked, these are things that you need to be addressing anyway. Never mind having a healthy reading practice. These are things that are not okay anyway. As a rule, you shouldn't have to be going through those things. We should be, you know, exploring how we can make life better and how we can feel more comfortable and more healthy, regardless of whether or not we can read. So I just wanted to put those things out there as well. Let go of wanting to be the reader that you were and start just being the reader that you are now. For me, being a reader and enjoying reading and enjoying books is a big part of my identity, and I think my ego was overly identifying with it, and it was stopping me from addressing the problems that I was having with reading. I didn't want to admit that I wasn't reading anything and I hadn't read anything in months and I just wasn't a reader anymore. It was actually like, it was horrible for me. You know, sometimes the ego just latches onto these things, especially if they're things that other people identify with you. Like a lot of people would say, oh, Kelly, yeah, she's a big reader. And that was just something that was like known about me. So I think your ego just readily attaches itself to these things that you're seen as being. And it can be really hard to admit, like, you know what, I don't read as much as I used to. I do have a lot more on now that prevents me from reading as much as I used to. I've had issues with reading for one reason or another, and it's okay. And I now need to lean into the process of reading from where I am currently. And I think if you can do that, that might really help you if you know that you overly identify with being a reader. Some people watching this will think to themselves, what do you mean the ego overly identifies with being a reader? I mean, it's not really a big thing that your ego would overly identify with. I would ask you to have a look at some of the tags on Instagram, like bookworms of Instagram and book lovers of Instagram or booktube or whatever. Have a look on there, all right? Because there's people, plenty of bloody people in the world that are really not only overly identifying themselves with being readers and having that be a very key part of what they want to project into the world and put across about themselves, but they're also making entire livings out of it in some cases. So yes, you can definitely very overly identify with being a reader, and the ego can very much enjoy what that means about you. And I think it's just really important to look at that shadow stuff. Obviously, have you ever known me to not think that's important? So it's just looking at yourself and thinking, okay, my ego is upset with the fact that I'm not doing well with this because I've always told myself it's a part of my character and it's something that I think of as being me. It's a part of me. And I think if we don't let ourselves accept that and get past it, we're not going to be able to find decent strategies to be the reader that we are right now. And if you've had children, or you're running a business, or you've experienced illness or mental health problems or whatever, or you've switched jobs, or you've switched countries, or just anything like that, things are just being a little bit Wheel of Fortune for you right now in your life. Yeah, you're not going to be the same reader that you were when you were 15 and you just like lay in the covers all Saturday and just read your book and it was bliss. That's not going to work for you anymore, and it's okay to recognise that. Or if you were an academic for a long time and you read a lot of books and you were very, very stringent in your studies and that became something that you overly identified with, but now you've got a job, you've got a fast-paced life, you've got a partner, you know, and it's hard for you to feel like, you know, you just want to get back to that thing you were in the past. Honey, you are who you are right now, and you are who you are right now because of everything you did then, and you need to allow yourself to just fall in love with reading now. You can't be stuck in the past and wanting to emulate the past when your present reality is so different. So definitely look at that, ask yourself if that applies to you, and if it does, then you know what to do. You've got to get in there and do that shadow work. You might want to ask yourself how you can multitask while you're reading. Now, earlier I mentioned different formats for reading, and I forgot to mention audiobook format, where you can just listen to the book rather than reading it in any way with your eyeballs. But it is one way that you can multitask really well. If you're into audiobooks or you want to try them, you can retain information and like get new information, enjoy the book, enjoy the work of literature or the work of non-fiction while you are on your exercise bike, in the gym or at home, while you're walking the dog, while you're in the bath. There's lots of ways that you can multitask while you're reading a physical book. For me, I like to go on the seated bike machine in the gym and read my book, and I will just go through the book while I'm doing my 20-minute or 30-minute workout. That is amazing. It makes me keep going with my workout because I kind of forget what my legs are doing because I'm so interested in what I'm reading, so I really like that. Public transport is another great way that you can make sure you're getting your reading time in while you're doing something else, while you're living your life, while you're waiting for friends who are late, or if you're early or whatever, or you're going to a job interview or something. Make sure you've got your book handy then, or your tablet handy then, and definitely be using it at that point. I like to read in the bath. I like to read before I go to sleep. So it's just those times where you find you can steal even a page or two. Sometimes I like to read while I'm waiting for a video to render, or just any of those kinds of things really, while I'm waiting for the shops to open if I need to go and get stuff and I've got a bit of spare time. Think about how you can get the reading time in. It doesn't need to be that you've got the luxury of an hour during which you can read uninterrupted and that's all you're going to be doing. It could be any number of things, you know. If you're going to get your hair done, take a book. If you're going to get a pedicure, take your book. You know, let yourself read in taxis. Like, you know, find times where you can whip your book out and have a little bit of a read, and it doesn't need to be that you need to sit down uninterrupted. Don't tell yourself that if you can't have that uninterrupted time, then you can't have any time. It's about snatching pieces of time and making them work for you. You might want to try joining a reading group in your area or a reading group online. That has been amazingly helpful for so many people. Knowing that you're going to get to a point where the book needs to be finished and you need to be prepared to share your ideas on the book is a great motivator. It's also motivating to have a reading buddy that you read alongside and you both decide to read the same book and discuss it over coffee or a beer. That can really work if you don't want to do a reading group, if you feel weird about groups but you maybe want to do it with one person, you can do that. Make sure that if you need that accountability and that interaction, that you have that. There's loads of reading groups online now and book clubs online now, so definitely allow yourself to explore that option. And a final thing I wanted to say before I end the video is that BookTube can be incredibly inspiring and motivating for a lot of people. There is a whole community on YouTube dedicated to talking about reading books and reviewing books. The majority of people reading and reviewing are reading and reviewing fiction, but there are some people that read and review non-fiction as well, or do a combination of the two, and I really do enjoy watching those kinds of videos. I will give you a word of warning though, BookTube is not always inspiring and motivating. It can feel pressurizing, it can lead to toxic comparison, and a lot of the to be read pile kind of videos where people show you what they've got in their to be read pile can feel a little bit overwhelming or disconcerting, or like maybe I should have that many things I should be reading. It can also cause a great temptation to go and buy more books. Book hauls can definitely create the temptation to haul books, and if you know that's part of your problem, that you've got too many books, too little time, and you can't decide what to read, then maybe stay away from the YouTube book hauls because they can be a little bit encouraging and enabling. So you might want to find what's best for you. I tend to find that watching book reviews is really helpful for me because I really enjoy the feeling of somebody just having delved into a book and really enjoyed it and being able to convey to me what they learned and what they really liked about it. I find that there's a couple of people I watch on YouTube who are kind of in the BookTube community, but they talk about other things as well. I'm going to leave the links to both of those women down below. They're called Leena and Sanne, and I really enjoy the book reviews that they do. I also really enjoy another woman who is in the BookTube community called Cinzia Dubois. I'll leave her down below as well. She does really good book reviews and she talks about issues to do with reading, and she helps people to have a better and healthier reading practice, and she's coming from a very academic background, so she's really interesting. So I'll leave all three of them down below. And I also want to recommend somebody from our own witchy community, Anya. She is incredible. She has an amazing channel. If you are not subscribed to Anya Anya, you need to be. She is fucking awesome. Subscribe to her Instagram as well, do yourself a favour. But she does amazing book reviews of witchy books. So if you're looking for somebody who does reasonably regular, great reviews that explain what was great about the book, what didn't really hit home about the book, and whether or not you might enjoy it, Anya is my #1 person that I really enjoy watching reviews from on this. So yeah, basically that's it for now. I hope that these tips have been helpful, and it was really interesting putting this together for you guys. And yeah, I hope that it helps as many of you as possible to get back onto the reading bandwagon if that's what you want to do. Much love, and I'm going to go and do a bit of reading now. Blessed be, chickens.